Alright, hey guys. After going through the first round of reaction papers, I'm here to give you some tips based on what you guys are writing. And this is also a really great way to work on argumentation, analytical, and writing skills applicable to many areas of the collegiate and the professional life. And what we're essentially doing here is literary criticism, and don't let the name freak you out. Remember that what we criticize can be movies, video clips, songs, books, short stories, poems, advertisements, anything. And the awesome thing about this assignment is that it's entirely directed by you. And this means you get to pick the main focus, which also can be pretty scary. So, the first step when it comes to doing this happens during reading. If you know you're going to write about a text, start to find points that might be good to write on. So often when I'm looking at a text I know that I'm going to discuss, I'll ask questions around gender. So how is the text defining them or shaping genders? Audience, who's being excluded or included? Is there an adaptation with which I can make some comparisons and start to draw out a really rich discussion of the ideas behind both of them. Looking for repeated numbers, words, phrases, characters, or behaviors is really important, and that can start to give you another sort of insight into the story. And then also I like to engage with it on a personal level. So do I agree with the choices of the characters or the message of the text? How does it fit in with my life and how I understand the world around me? And then also criticism. What are readings or secondary sources saying about this? And this can help to start to give you a little bit more direction, and you also need to support your ideas throughout the paper, and other writers will make your argument richer and more credible. And this research is really going to shape your argument. If you agree with them, if you disagree with them, it can totally change how you approach a text as well. So check out JSTOR, Project Muse, ProQuest, and the MSU Library website for other outside resources that can help give you a little bit of direction. Alright, now I'm going to show you one of potentially the most important parts of a literary criticism paper, the thesis. The thesis is your argument, the point of your paper, what you're going to talk about and why it's important. And you don't have to make a thesis first, even though it's generally in your introductory paragraph. It's often one of the last things that I do. Now, a good thesis is defensible but debatable. So what does this mean? Let's look at an example. One that I saw a lot was something like, the queen bee is a classic example of a fairy tale. While this does seem defensible and debatable because, maybe it's not a classic example, but here are some other things that we can talk about that are classic examples, and we see it here, it's not really strong. It's vague, it's so broad, not a good one. However, let's look at a different one. The queen bee uses abstract narrative episodes ending with an advantageous marriage and wealth to capture the hopes of both the bourgeois and non-bourgeois society who consumed this tale. So you know what I'm going to talk about in my body paragraphs: the abstract episodes, the ending, and then the society around the text, the bourgeois and the non-bourgeois. And you can see too that I can insert scholarly discussion about the tale itself and then the socioeconomic factors of the historical time period. And I would actually like to say a way to make this thesis even better is to specify which bourgeois society, so the 18th century, the 19th century, just to give it a little bit more specificity. Or if you want, you can jump between periods. You can compare and contrast the 17th and the 18th, or the 18th and the 19th, or even the 18th and today, if I can find the research that's going to track these two. So a good thesis is actually really hard to come by, and it's going to take some time, and you got to manipulate what you're saying a little bit. You got to be specific, but you also got to give yourself some wiggle room to discuss many aspects of your point. And pretty much everything that you write about has to come back to your thesis. This helps keep the context focused and moving with direction towards the conclusion. But your body also has to reflect your thesis has to reflect the body. And also, don't be afraid to talk about your counter arguments, things that go against what you're saying. It makes for a well-rounded and rich paper to discuss these things, and it shows that you're critically thinking about the topic. But really, defensible but debatable. So another element is quoting. And this supports your argument, gives you credibility, depth, and shows your engagement with the subject. We're going to go through the actual formatting of it in another section. But right now, this is just how to incorporate it content-wise. You can't just drop it on the audience. They're going to get really confused and it really disrupts the flow of your paper. So I'm going to show you what's called the chicken foot method, something I learned from a high school teacher. Again, this is ensuring that the quotation isn't just dropped on the audience and its importance to your argument is completely understood. All right, so you're going to start off with the introduction of the topic. Now this can be within a paragraph. So, for example, you say, several stories throughout our cinematic history advocate for the power of love, especially true love. One such story, The Princess Bride, examines the nature of true love through the tumultuous relationship between Princess Buttercup and Wesley. So we're going to be looking at true love, as I said, and we're going to be looking at specifically with the Princess Bride. And then we can put in the quotation itself, as said by the bishop who is in the process of marrying Buttercup to an evil count, and love, true love, will follow you forever. And then, after you've inserted that, immediately after, you want to talk about why this is important. So, the bishop represents not only the heteronormative church, but also a sort of wise messenger on behalf of the narrative regarding the nature of human condition. While he is satirized, he also gives the audience the opportunity to consider the ultimate condition of the relationship between Buttercup and Wesley, that is implicitly true love. We are then privy to the end before it even happens, reunion of the couple. So as you can see, we're talking about true love, but we're talking about it in the context of the Princess Bride, and also how much we are obsessed with true love. As I said a little bit earlier, our cinematic history advocate for the power of love, and we're going to see this in the end here. So really, you're trying to make mini paragraphs, intro, quotation, discussion within your paragraphs. And like I said, this is going to make it so your audience really understands why this quote is important. So there are a ton of other things that go into writing in addition to your content. Generally, 5-paragraph structures are going to work here. An intro that captures all that you will talk about and get the reader up to speed with necessary information, including a small plot summary if necessary. Body paragraphs that richly talk about your topic and are connected with transitions, like, in addition to this point, however, by contrast, furthermore, another element of the story. And a conclusion that brings all your information back together and then takes that to a larger picture, some kind of big impact. But also remember that you can use other ways or methods of approaching literary criticism. Just make sure that your essay stays connected. Make sure that the audience knows why each paragraph is important to your larger points. Please avoid long plot summary. If you need to summarize a story, it should be no more than 2 or 3 sentences. Not the whole paper, not large chunks of the paper. No. That's a retelling, not a reaction. As for the grammar and semantic elements, the main idea, like I said, is to be clear. If your audience is confused, it takes away from the content. We really want to engage with your argument and see what you're saying about the fairy tales, but if we can't tell what it actually is, then we can't evaluate that portion of your work. Watch out for something that's called hypercorrection, which happens when we sound really academic or smart with complex phrases, using grammar rules we really don't understand, or other things that just mix up what we're trying to say. It muddles the clarity. Sure, I'm a big fan of using big words in there, some 5-star, gold-star vocab words, but at the end of the day, no matter how long or obscure the phrase is, we're looking for your ability to engage critically with the content. Like I said, you do have to cite some things. You can use MLA, APA, Chicago, whatever you want, but generally literary criticism is in MLA. Check out owl.english.com purdue.edu for these rules. And one of the main reasons we want you to be able to cite things in kind of a systematic way is just to clear up confusion generally, and then also to make sure that you're giving credit where credit's due. So as you can see, we've got Tatar, the last name of somebody, the page number, right after the article that she wrote. And then also making sure that you give credit, like I said, where credit is due. And something that happens occasionally in the fairy tale and household tales is that main characters are going to share the same name as the titles of the stories. And you want to be clear that when you're talking about Cinderella, you're talking about the plot, or you're talking about the story itself, or you're talking about the character. So one of them's either going to be in quotation marks or italicized when you're talking about the story, but then the character themselves is going to be in regular text. Like, we're not really strict about this, but we just want to be able to tell what's going on in your essay. So, in conclusion, just to summarize some points for you, ask questions to your text. To start thinking about potential topics that interest you. Start to develop some of those questions that get you going. Have a clear thesis that is defensible but debatable to give your paper a main focus and direction. Everything comes back to this. Your thesis has to reflect your paper, and your paper has to reflect your thesis. Use quoting to support your argument, using the chicken foot method to richly incorporate quotations into your discussion. And of course, write clearly to make sure the audience understands your argument, linking all the ideas together within the body. So those are some quick tips to writing a literary criticism paper, and as usual, if you want another set of eyes to look at your work, don't hesitate to send it over. Have a good day.